Okay, welcome to the program. This is the Otherppl Show, a weekly podcast featuring in-depth interviews with today's leading writers. I am Brad Listi, and I'm in Los Angeles. It's great to be with you. Hope you're hanging on out there, wherever you happen to be, maintaining your tenuous grip on sanity. I'm going to be talking with Megan Abbott today. She is one of our foremost writers of crime fiction, and she is returning to this show after, I think, more than a decade. This is her second appearance on the Otherppl Show, and yeah, it was a while ago. I feel like she's really taken off in the years since we last talked, and she's got a new novel out called Dorado Drive. It is available from Putnam. It is a superb work of crime fiction set in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, the suburb of Detroit in which Megan Abbott was raised. I believe this is the first time she's ever really written into that place. And it takes place in the 1980s. I think I have my head on straight. Right around then, during the decline of the auto industry. And it's a story about sisters and pyramid schemes and horse girls and gin and tonic and murder. Megan Abbott is masterly at creating mood and atmosphere on the page, and she has had success over the years in adapting her work for the screen, film and television stuff. You're going to hear us talk about all of the above in just a couple of minutes. Today's episode is brought to you by Tin House, publisher of the novel Wanting, the acclaimed debut by Claire Gia. Wanting is the official July pick of my book club, the Otherppl Book Club. You should join the Otherppl Book Club. I'm just saying, you can do that at the show's official website, otherppl.com. For only $9.99 a month, you get a new book delivered to your door every 30 days. And I interview book club authors on this program, so it makes for an enriching and holistic literary experience. Wanting is a searing debut novel of envy, longing, and regret across 3 lives and 2 countries. It's a siren song that explores why, even as it destroys us, we always want more. One more time, the novel is called Wanting by Claire Gia, available from Tin House. So a quick plug for my email newsletter. It goes out once a week. You can sign up for it over at bradlisti.substack.com. I would love it if you did that. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm on Instagram and Blue Sky. And I have a new company that is in the works, and it will be launching soon. It is called Deep Dive, and it specializes in the creation of audio courses. The debut course from Deep Dive is called How to Write a Novel, and it features more than 50 hours of never-before-heard conversations with dozens of today's leading writers, including people like Emily St. John Mandel, Melissa Broder, Vivi Ganesh, Shananthan Purachista Hakpur, Steve Almond, Antoine Wilson, Wahini Vara, Madeline Lucas, Rita Bullwinkle, Maya Binyam. Who else? Matthew Salisis. There's a lot. There's like more than 3 dozen instructors in this course, and it's huge. It's more than 50 hours, plus bonus materials. It's going to be launching very soon. It's been a long process getting this thing ready, doing all of this work, and I'm very excited to share it with you. Once again, the company is called Deep Dive. The debut course is called How to Write a Novel. And I forgot to mention, I'm the host of the course. So How to Write a Novel proceeds as a series of dialogues. It's conversations. It's not just somebody talking at you. It's me interviewing writers and talking to them about craft and process and their lives and the stories of how they got their work done. There's never been a writing course quite like this one at this scale, and it's coming soon. So you can join the wait list over at www.deepdive.audio, and you can follow Deep Dive on Blue Sky and Instagram. So my guest once again is Megan Abbott. Her new novel is called Dorado Drive, available from Putnam. Megan Abbott is the Edgar Award-winning author of 11 crime novels, including You Will Know Me, Give Me Your Hand, and the New York Times bestseller, The Turnout, which won the LA Times Book Prize. Megan received her Ph.D. in English and American Literature from NYU, and her writing has appeared in the New York Times, The Guardian, the Paris Review, and the Wall Street Journal. Dare Me is a television series that she adapted from her own novel, which is streaming on Netflix, and I'm just very pleased to welcome her back onto this show to talk with me about her latest book. So let's get to the conversation. Here I am with Megan Abbott, and her new novel, once again, is called Dorado Drive.
It's not the most likely comparison in a story about suburban ladies who lunch, but that really was how I thought of it because, having seen, as a Gen Xer, having seen that Goodfellas countless times, it's mapped on my brain. I can come in at any point in the movie and start reciting it. But it was sort of my model for an example of a group of people gathering together to pull off a crime, in that case a heist, and then they all have to sort of keep quiet about what they have done, and they can't, of course, so it all starts to unravel. So it's really sort of the middle of the movie, that Lufthansa heist, and really one of the most iconic scenes when after they're kind of celebrating and it's Christmas, that scene in the bar where De Niro's trying to control the crew and telling them to be careful with their money. And then one of them comes in with his wife in this new fur coat, and he starts to take the coat off her back. And he said, "You can't do this. Take it back. Because they can't be showing their spoils." So that was huge for me. And there just seemed something delightful about applying that kind of gangster logic to these suburban ladies in their 40s who similarly have to protect something that they're telling themselves is legal, but is clearly not.
So we're talking about the movie Goodfellas and how it was an influence on Megan's new novel, Dorado Drive, which, in addition to being a crime story, is also very much to me a novel of place. And it takes place in your hometown.
Yes.
Where you were raised, in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, which is like kind of a Tony suburb of Detroit, right?
Yes. It's right outside of Detroit, and I had never really written about it directly. I mean, it was not I didn't like living there. I must admit, my family didn't really belong. We were not Tony. It really was the place where you either live near the lake or the freeway, and we live near the freeway. So we were not members of the country club or anything, but it was really where all the auto executives all had their big homes, their grand homes. And it's very, I think I put this line in the book, but my dad used to always say that Eisenhower is still president in Grosse Pointe. And that really was sort of the feeling. It was really like a super WASP conservative community. And, it sort of was perfect for the book because when I was growing up, the heyday of the auto industry was already over and the city had kind of been decimated. And so there was this sense that the good days were past, but it hadn't really touched Grosse Pointe yet. This is the high up people. But by the 2008 recession and the auto industry bailout, it had. So that was sort of gave me this perfect place and timing and a way, I guess, to mine stuff from my childhood that I had, buried long ago about what it was like being there.
So this book, in addition to really kind of digging into Grosse Pointe in that time period and kind of peeling away the surface layers and like looking at what's happening beneath, it's definitely a story about women and sisterhood. And I think maybe most interestingly to me and possibly to you is that it's a story about female desire that is sort of unrestrained in a way, and maybe unrestrained in a way that would have been particularly unique in that era. Maybe less so today, though I don't know. You might disagree. But can you just talk a little bit about that part of it?
That really emerged for me as the beating center of the book somehow through the mechanism of the money, that they all need money. But then it became a desire much larger. And I thought about that particularly in that era and really all all of my growing up years, if you were a woman in your 40s and 50s in particular, you weren't supposed to want anything. You were supposed to be the dutiful wife, the caring mother, the reliable PTA member, that was really, you weren't supposed to want anything beyond that. And so I wanted these women to want things. And I think it hasn't changed that much. I would say minimally, but I think expressions of female desire now of women in their middle age is usually made a joke, like it's funny, it's sort of ridiculous. In comedies, it's often played for, a cougar or something, or it's a horror element. I think we've seen a lot of those old women as horror movie villain, as having this sort of libidinous, frightening, disgusting libidinous energy. And so I think it's very hard to get it straight. Even something like Baby Girl that came out at the end of last year, that Nicole Kidman movie, felt like it had to tidy up her life by the end of the movie. Not a spoiler, but vague spoiler. So I really wanted that there to be, especially Pam, the sort of starriest sister in the book, that she would not feel guilty for wanting things beyond what she was supposed to.
So I think this is a good time to give listeners who have not had a chance to read just kind of a broad strokes overview of what's happening in Dorado Drive. I'll take a stab at it, and then you can correct me and clean up after me. This is a book, as I was saying, about sisters, and specifically it's about the Bishop sisters, Pam, Deborah, and Harper. They were raised in Grosse Pointe in kind of, in splendor, at least for a time. Their father was one of these auto industry executives, and they had everything they could ever want, and they lived this kind of materialistic life. And then the bottom dropped out. He lost his job. The money went away, and the parents kind of died maybe not too long after, sort of, which often happens when there's a huge financial calamity and people lose their identity because their identity is so bound up in this money. And then we meet the Bishop sisters when they are in their middle age, and things are not going well financially for any of them. You have Pam, who is in the midst of an acrimonious divorce. She's got adolescent/college age kids, 2 of them. Her husband, Doug, is kind of a slime ball, and he's like stealing money from the kids' trust funds. And then you have Deborah, who's in financial. And so Pam is trying to figure out how to survive on her own, has no money, and the kids are going to school. She's got to pay tuition, etc. Deborah, Bishop, the other sister, I think the middle sister, is dealing with her husband's cancer. Her husband has cancer, and she's got a bunch of medical debt. Those bills are piling up, and they just keep coming, which is another charming thing about America. And then Harper, who is the protagonist of the book and the narrator, right? Am I characterizing?
So close third person narrator.
Close third person, yeah, forgive me. And she is the youngest sister. She's kind of the outsider sister. She's lesbian. She's a horse girl. She never really launched, though I hate that phrase, at least in the corporate capitalist view of things. She never latched on or found her way, but she loves horses and women, and she works at the stable, and she, I don't know, she fled Grosse Pointe at some point. She's in financial trouble, but then has returned, and that's kind of where things pick up. And then I guess I'll hand it off to you. You can correct anything I got wrong. And then I want you to kind of maybe give the setup with regard to the wheel.
Yes. No, that all is great. And really that's the point. Yeah. They're all at these sort of crisis points with money. And that's when opportunity emerges. And this is really based on a lot of research I did, about these kind of, female financial empowerment circles, clubs, societies that emerged during the pandemic when everyone was sort of nervous about their finances. But this one I've named The Wheel, which they're invited by a woman named Sue Fox, who they've all known their whole lives, who's just one of the women that was always president of the sorority, head of the PTA, in charge of the benefit committee. And now she has a new club that she wants them all to join. And it's designed to help them all make money. And so one by one, each of the sisters is either enticed in some cases, or in Harper's case, dragged into it out of necessity. And it's this group of women who have sort of believe they have figured out a way to access some real cash. And it's it's of course, as one might guess, it doesn't go well, but it does at the start. And especially Pam is really great at it for the first time in her life. She's really found something all on her own that she can excel at. And it's completely intoxicating.
Yeah, this book stressed me out. Like, as somebody who's, I'm not rich, right? I'm like struggling. I'm trying to find my way always. And I'm like reading about these people who are in calamitous financial scenarios and just like desperate for money. And it just made me think about the toxicity of money, this book did.
Definitely. I think in some ways it's the structure of a country club or a university club where it's really rich people wanting to network with other rich people and exchange favors and to not let any outsiders in. And that's, attention the wheel requires constant recruitment to continue. You need to always be recruiting, but they really only want to recruit their kind, so quote unquote. And I think that's really that's the world these women grew up in, certainly. So it's not unfamiliar to them, but it always reminds me of, if you ever end up in some occasion where you're out to dinner or to something with someone who's very rich, you will always be the one to pick up the check because they don't ever pick up the check because they're not used to paying for things. And they operate in a completely different world than the rest of us. So I think you're right. I think Harper is the one who's never had money at all, is the only one who really understands money. Even remotely. And I think for the other sisters, for Deborah, it is quite practical because of her husband, but it's also, she's very tied up in the perception of herself, appearances. And I think for Pam, the once she gets a taste of it, it's thrilling. It's thrilling to make her own money. With women, it does get tied up with issues of independence and freedom. And so it gets really knotted up for her, I think, that this is something she's finally been able to do for herself. So I think there's a lot of merging of issues of class and gender for that reason.
Well, and I think it's important to flag the time period that this is taking place in again, because as you said, like Grosse Pointe was sort of frozen in time anyway. It was kind of an Eisenhower town in the 80s. But just historically speaking, like women couldn't even have their own lines of credit until the 1970s.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even that far removed from that change, where the women in this story, I don't know if they felt it as children, probably not, but maybe they had some peripheral awareness of how closed off opportunities were, even at just that level, which seems so basic now. Like women couldn't get their own credit cards, right?
Yeah, no, it's staggering to ponder. And then really this was true among the women of my parents' age growing up. It really was about marrying someone who would be you might sell real estate or have some small thing, but you really were. It does feel very archaic to say now, but you were really marrying the breadwinner. You were not going to be the breadwinner.
Yeah. And then these multi-level marketing schemes, what do they call pyramids? It's a pyramid scheme that the wheel is. And it was calling to mind for me a lot of different things. I guess there were these like the Mary Kay Cosmetics.
Yes.
Or what was that? Oh God, what was the ultimate pyramid scheme? And it was like you were selling products and...
Is it Herbalife or Amway?
Amway.
Yes.
That was in my childhood. I think.
Michigan one. Yeah.
Was it from Michigan?
Yes. Betsy DeVos's family is
founded
Amway.
Well, I want to say I had some relatives who got into that for a time. They were trying to sell us like moisture, what was soap or whatever.
Like a chapstick, their own chapstick. Yeah. Every product you can imagine.
So yeah, it brought to mind that. It also brought to mind Tupperware parties.
Yes.
Which was very much like early to mid 80s.
And it really began in the 50s, Tupperware.
But that was still happening, I guess, is the point. Definitely. And I remember it. I guess my mom went to a Tupperware party, but there are people listening almost certainly who have no clue what a Tupperware party is. What is that? I don't even know if I know how it works. You bring, like, Tupperware was like plastic dishware, and you just bring it's like a potluck, but you bring it in Tupperware?
Well, yes. And, it was sort of before everything, when it was founded, plastic was relatively new, and the notion that you could have all these containers for everything and not have to carry dishes to your potluck or to store things in the refrigerator, leftovers. And they would have everything. But it was still knocking around when I was growing up. I mean, we had some Tupperware in our household. The main thing with the MLMs versus the straight pyramid schemes are that you had to buy all that product and then sell it to your friends. And so the classic case with Mary Kay was often a situation you had to buy like a couple $1,000s worth of cosmetics, and you would not make any money until you sold all of it. So you're doomed to fail. And the straight pyramid scheme, the buy-in is cash. So you don't even have a product. But I think that's what makes it harder to explain to people why it's illegal. You're not selling a bad product, which mostly these products are. So it's more, when I was working on the book and even sending it to my editor or different people, they would all say, wait, why is this illegal? Again, you have to kind of think about it.
Yeah. Why is it illegal? And just so people, just to be absolutely clear,
yes.
The wheel in this book, this kind of ladies group, like MLMS, multi-level marketing scheme, you buy in for $5,000.
Yes.
And then you have to recruit other women to come join this thing. And then once you've recruited, 5 people?
Yeah.
You get paid out?
Yes. You will collect the pot at the end of the night of all the new members. So you only have to pay once. And it works. They all work for everyone who comes in at the start, right? That's where it's easy. And really why it's illegal is that you're promising people a payoff that you inevitably can't deliver because there's only so many people you can recruit. Similarly, you also get in trouble because, there's the belief that you don't have to declare this money on your taxes. It falls under the gift tax, where before the gift tax kicks in, because the amount is low enough. But of course, you're collecting, say, 5,000, 5,000, 5,000 from 5 people. That's over the gift limit. You should be declaring it. So usually when they indict people for these schemes, it's usually tax evasion and wire fraud, communicating, which is what they get the gangsters for, of course, communicating about something that is bringing people under false pretenses and can communicate about how to hide their money, not only from the IRS, but from banks. So not depositing more than the threshold where banks have to report that you brought in, $12,000 in cash, but they don't have to report if you brought in $9,999 in cash. I learned so much about this and about money laundering, and I really feel like I could start my own pyramid scheme at this point.
I was going to say, I think maybe this is the next step. And I don't want to spoil anything because this book is a kind of mystery. It's a crime novel. Can we just say one of the sisters doesn't make it? Right.
Yes. I think it's pretty clear from the first few pages that there's trouble coming. Yeah.
Yeah. There's trouble coming, but it's money. It's a pyramid scheme. It's financial desperation. And not just among these sisters, but kind of among all the women. There's a hunger and a desperation. And like we've been talking about, the bottom has kind of dropped out in the auto industry in this era in Grosse Pointe, Michigan. And there's a lot of people who are sort of trying to prop up their old lifestyle, without the cash to back it up. And Harper, the youngest Bishop's sister, right? She's the youngest?
Yes, yeah.
And, we were kind of saying she's the outsider and is the only one who really understands money because she's experienced the lack of it and has kind of been scraping by her whole adult life. And so I think it's even said explicitly in the book at some point, either by Harper or in the narration, that, she would never even be in this thing. She would never be a part of this wheel group of women were it not for her sister Pam, who has like all this, charisma and is kind of she's one of these people who can like throw a party.
Yes.
These people mystify me. They're like indefatigable. Like the thought of throwing a party, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm going to need to sleep for a week, or it's too much. But she's one of these people who can do that. And so she kind of draws Harper in. And so I think Harper serves as kind of a surrogate for the reader. She's the ideal surrogate because she's kind of the outsider, who's involved in this scene. And you do a really great job of writing sisterhood and female relationships. Makes me wonder, do you have sisters?
No, and I think that's why I like to write about them. I've written about them before. I've written a lot about female friendship, close female friendship, but sisters are a whole different bag. I just have one older brother, but I think sisters, I guess it's all the layers that fascinate me of competition and loyalty and petty grievances and microaggressions and then like competing narratives of their childhood and like all that stuff. And in the way that women, particularly Midwestern women, speak, there's a lot of coded, digs and insults and because it's three sisters, and like any group, particularly women of three, someone is always the outsider, at any given moment. So sort of as a way to sort of deepen all of this is that they have, and because even though they're pretty close in age, they really did have sort of different childhoods, because Harper really experienced when things were going badly, that her childhood was when her parents were a mess, as opposed to her other sisters who saw them when they're still upright, and that is deep into the gin and tonic tub.
This is the thing. Like, it's very clear to me reading this book as a fellow Midwesterner that you grew up in the Midwest. There's just sense memory details, like the gin and tonics at those parties. And I don't know, there's not a lot of cigarettes in this book. There's some though,
there's
right?
There's a few, yeah.
There's a few. Like cigarettes and gin and tonics and this weird repression. My wife is from Minnesota. I often talk about this. I feel like Minnesota in particular is kind of famously repressed, right? Like this, everybody's Minnesota nice. There's this whole thing, but yet there's all this kind of subterranean stuff going on. I think you could say the same thing about Wisconsin, where I was growing up. And I'm interested in just hearing your thoughts on why this is. It's unique. I don't know if it's entirely unique to the Midwest, but it's very pronounced there.
Yes.
Why?
Yes. I mean, there's probably some kind of ethnographic study of who was, who transplanted themselves. And, in the upper Midwest, you have a specific case of all the Scandinavians, and I would wonder about that. But I do think part of it is that Midwest has always been America's idea of itself, this sort of all-American place, this sort of, like when they made those Hollywood movies in the 30s, they always wanted it to be in these movies about Americana to be set in the Midwest, and they wanted everyone to have that flat Midwestern accent is sort of the standard. So I think there is this sort of sense of there's this ideal that is important to uphold, I think. And I think, it's definitely less ethnically diverse too. So there is a kind of insularity to the Midwest that's that is sort of putting on your smile, putting on your smile, but not really. It was really not till I moved to New York that I experienced where you could see people of a dozen ethnicities. When I'm in Queens, of a dozen ethnicities walking down the block, but that's not so true. So there's a certain kind of tribal insularity, I think, to the Midwest that maybe explains some of it. And, it is, I'm going to be hugely generalizing here about Protestants, but there is this way that you're not, that, this sort of, you're supposed to have a stoic presentation, right? There's a lot of stoicism. And I think that's true in the upper Midwest as well, right? That this is not a touchy-feely culture. It's performance, a lot of performance.
Well, it makes me think there's also something to do with masculinity, like how you're going to be you're going to be a man. You're not going to talk about your feelings. You're not going to emote. You're not going to whine. You're not going to complain or anything.
Completely. I mean, women rarely shared their feelings, men never. I mean, growing up, I experienced that all the time. The fathers were particularly mysterious to me. I wouldn't even know what they did for their jobs, and I see them only in glimpses, they're like a ghost passing in the night. You would never really get inside that, which always gives the feeling of this kind of blue velvet feeling that there's some kind of rage boiling beneath the surface with these men.
Dude, listen, I can remember some dads in my neighborhood in Milwaukee that scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
And it was clear there's a lot of booze and they're just pissed.
Really, I always remember when I was a little kid, my best friend, her parents split up, turned out to be temporarily. And all of a sudden when I would spend time with her, we would have to go with her. And her dad had her on the weekend. We would go to this lady's house. It was clear that this one had been his mistress, and now he was spending his weekends with her. But no one ever explained it to us. We were just at this strange lady's house. We were supposed to play, and it was never discussed by anyone. No one knew. So that's a classic Midwestern experience, I think.
God. Well, I want to talk with you about your career a little bit, because since the last time we talked, I don't even know what year it was, but it was probably more than a decade ago. Things have really taken off. I mean, things were going well back when we talked, but then after you did the show, things exploded for you.
Yes, that's why I had to come back.
I was going to say, you just launched you into a great run, but you've published a series of books that have done well. You've kind of made a name for yourself as one of our foremost writers of crime fiction. And then you've also had success in film and television. And I know there are probably a lot of people listening who are writerly, who might, aspire to such a career and be wondering, like, how'd you do it? So I think I want to start on the book side of things, with crime fiction, which, I like to joke, like, it actually sells. Like, people actually read crime fiction, which I don't know if that occurred to you when you were kind of formulating plans for a career, or if it's just kind of a happy accident of like taste and market.
Yes, definitely a happy accident. But I feel relieved that I'm in one of the genres that seems to always be selling.
Yeah. But you also, I mean, God, my memory is spotty, but I want to say we talked about film noir. And like your love of film noir. I love film noir too. But you kind of grew up on this stuff. Like, that's how you got interested in writing these kinds of stories, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, those movies, even more than books, even though I didn't read constantly, I read a lot of true crime as a kid, but it was really the movies. It was really, this is very similar to what we were talking about, the film noir. Everything that's being kept secret in one's regular life is laid bare in noir. Everyone is acting on all their drives, desire, and greed and revenge. And so there is something very primal about those movies, and also very glamorous. So I really started writing because I wanted to write myself into one of those movies.
Okay. Yeah. And this is something that I think your books are known for. Like, they often gets noted how great the atmospherics of a Megan Abbott novel are, and like how the mood is really palpable. And I'm wondering, as you try to maybe diagnose your own work, if you would attribute your ability to kind of create atmosphere and mood and to capture like aesthetic. Like, you talk about glamour. There is something glamorous about these ladies who lunch. And there's something sort of fabulous. Like, there's something very fun about imagining these ladies of this era with their hair, and I can see the clothes, and I can see that Midwestern neighborhood with its manicured lawns and these big old houses that are maybe, like, if you really look, in a little bit of disrepair. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I could see it all, and I can see why you would be attracted to it, not just because you grew up near it, but just because it's juicy. And I could see there's something kind of noir about it all if you twist it right. But in terms of drawing this stuff in literature, and having a real facility for it. Would you attribute that facility to watching a lot of noir film?
Yeah, I think about that so much because, on the page, you have to conjure what, in TV or film, you have your production designer, you have music, you have sound design, you have all these things you have the way the camera moves to bring the viewer into the mood and atmosphere. But on the page, you have to find ways to do that. And it's sort of, for me, part of it is I have to get myself in that space. So a lot of the details I choose are to get me feeling like I'm in that, all white living room and looking out the putting green outside. And, so I'm adding the details that help me get there, but also, trying to help the reader find their space in it, leaving that door open. So sometimes the thing you can't use, for instance, people often point out how much smell there is in my books. And I think that's the one thing you can't do in movies and TV, but I do try to talk about, the cologne and perfume people are wearing, or the sort of, the smell of new paint or mildew in a house that isn't in its top form. And so trying to find all these tricks and then always sort of trying to pull back at just enough details so that the reader can fill in their own history, so they can enter it, and then they fill in, they make the rest of the atmosphere themselves. And I always think Tennessee Williams has this long quote, but the gist of it is mystery must be kept. And he's all that you don't tell everything, that you have to leave the door open for the audience to come in and to fill the rest in themselves. And so always trying to strike that balance is to let, I think that's one of the reasons I don't usually set my books in a particular space. I want the reader to plug in their suburb. This was an unusual case where I got specific.
Yeah, it's also kind of fun. It's fun and a little bit funny to think about glamour in context. Like there's glamour with a capital G, where it's like Anna Wintour and a bunch of celebrities like sitting next to a catwalk or whatever, or on a red carpet or something, dressed to the nines and wearing like $6 million worth of jewelry or something. But there's also like glamour in like a Midwestern suburb of a kind, and it might be, some ladies group and everyone's dressed up, or it could be some dinner party or, but I remember growing up, like there were certain people who just seemed fancy or like super beautiful or had like some kind of like whiff of the exotic.
Yes.
And to like, the larger culture, it would be like, what? But when you're there and you're in it, it's real.
Completely. I mean, that was my sense of it. It's sort of like when the party's going on, the adult party's going on downstairs and you're the kid upstairs, and it seems so enticing what's going on down there. It really was, it was, bar carts and the tinkling of ice cubes and everyone in their, best pastels and this sort of ceremony of Midwestern dining and, the spread and the deviled eggs and the big platters. And, there is a kind of, and this sort of, that feeling too that we were talking about, that everyone had their secrets in the room and the room was full of secrets at any given time that you wouldn't know about. No one was sharing, which is another kind of glamour.
Yeah, I feel like things have changed maybe a little bit. I feel like adults, at least in my orbit, like here we've raised our kids in Los Angeles. I feel like adults are at least a little bit more transparent than when I was growing up.
They're also more interested in their children, which was not true. Right?
Yeah. We were growing up. I was just talking about this on this show with my friend. We do a pop culture series on this, on this podcast. My friend Mira, and I was like, she's like a millennial, and I'm like, you do realize that when I was growing up, like we just left the house at like 9:00 in the morning,
Yes.
like came home when it was dark. Like it was totally different. And I guess like to kind of continue the line of questioning that I started a minute ago with regard to the success that you've had and the crossover success that you've had in film and television, just like to maybe just hear you talk a little bit about the creative journey that you've been on. like since we last spoke, like over the last decade, you've been very prolific, and I feel like maybe it's gotten a little bit easier for you to make books, or no? Like, this is a eternal question.
Yeah. 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 I think, I did kind of fall backwards into screenwriting, though I would have always loved to do it, as a movie lover. But it's become at least half my professional life now. And I think I really like having both to go toggle back and forth because they're so different. But it really happened only because I had my novel Dare Me, which is me. This is about murderous cheerleaders, which is maybe when we spoke, but that there was a lot of Hollywood interest in that. So I was able to be attached to write the script. And it was originally going to be a feature film. Eventually it became a TV series, but that was really my way in. And then I was a staff writer on HBO's The Deuce. Then I had some writer's room experience. So I was sort of dipping in, and then bit by bit, once you have things go forward, and Dare Me, I co-show ran that, then other opportunities open up. But I've really liked it. I'm adapting this book right now for A24, and it's been so fun. But if there's any business that is more precarious than publishing, it's Hollywood, especially now. So I feel like I have one foot on one unstable boat and one foot on the other, and they're both rocking constantly.
I was going to say, but hey, you're floating. I'm
still upright for the time. And I, they're both heartbreak businesses, but you always can at least move over to the other one when the one is breaking your heart. So,
well, that's a good takeaway. But I mean, and I think maybe the other thing that you kind of alluded to a minute ago, but I want to kind of get into a little bit more, is that you said you sort of fell into screenwriting, and it's kind of a miserable business to try to break into. It's so frustrating, and I went through it a little bit, taking general meetings and people being really nice. And then you're like, okay. And they're like, yeah, we want to partner with you. And you're like, all right. And then you leave and like, you never hear from them again.
Yes.
Like, or it's like you get like, into the writing process and you're handing in scripts, and then suddenly it implodes and somebody changes jobs. And like you say, it's a heartbreak business. Yeah. But for somebody listening who's like, man, I really want to do what Megan is doing, do you recommend starting by writing books? Because there's obviously, or at least theoretically, more money in film and television.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to make a buck publishing books, even crime books. Like you still have to do it at a high level in order to get any traction. But I think maybe from the outside looking in, I would say, well, like with the books, it's your IP, right?
Yes.
And it's like, it's you running the show. You kind of have final cut, and the books sink or swim based on your ability to execute. And if you can do it, and you can have success, and especially if you can have like repeat success and build like a readership and a market for your work, then maybe transitioning to Hollywood becomes easier a little bit. And it might be, if there's an audience that's kind of primed, it might be easier to get a project made, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would never encourage anyone who wasn't writing novels that wanted also to write screenwriting to write a novel, because it's such a long slog to write a novel, and it is a hard business. You have to kind of love it. But anyone who's written a novel even and is really interested in screenwriting, I would say you have one leg up because of the IP. We're at a real moment, and have been for several years now, where having IP, it really gets you one leg up. For sure. And particularly if you write genre fiction, just because there's a belief that the sort of story, churning of story, especially in TV, you need to have, endless story. And things need to move very fast right now. We've all seen these shows, right, where there's like like 3 twists in the pilot. So that's just very marketable right now, those kinds of stories, if anything is. But I think, right now is a particularly hard time in Hollywood because of the impact from the strike and the sort of collapse of the streaming model is, now it's sort of rebuilding. But I think it's going to take a couple of years to open up again, because if you'd asked me 6 or 7 years ago, I would say get in a room, try to get in a writer's room, write your spec and submit. But that there's not very many rooms right now. So I would say, yeah, if you like to write fiction, I think it's a better route right now. Or if you are a journalist, those articles get optioned all the time, and then you have your foot in the door too.
I feel like it's always in some state of flux. That was my experience too. Like you're talking to your agent, you're like, oh yeah, we're going to write this, and he's like, oh, don't write that.
Yeah.
They're not looking for that right now. They're looking for this. And then you're like, okay, so we'll write this. Then you write that, and they're like, well, that. People are sick of that right now. And it's like, it's never ending. And it's like, well, the streaming market is collapsing. And it's like, really? And then the next like month, you'll be talking to somebody, be like, man, they're just buying shit up right now, like left and right.
Yeah, I mean, they have to have shows to air. There was a bubble, it's true, where there was something like 600 shows. 2 years ago, 600 shows were airing at the same time, and that's not sustainable. So they say it's a correction, but I think in the moment of correction, the things that sell are in some ways the most commercial, the most 4-quadrant, the most international stuff. And that, I wouldn't qualify for that, even writing crime fiction, because there's still these like deeply embedded Hollywood ideas about female-centered stories, even though women make most of the decisions on what services to subscribe to, et cetera. They're still sort of, it's a little small if it's about women. So it's not easy, even with a genre piece. But I do think it will open up again, because it has to, because we're all watching TV all the time.
Yeah. And you mentioned the term 4-quadrant. I can imagine somebody listening being like, what is that?
Yeah, right. It is like you're trying to get every kind of audience, age, gender, that's really the idea, that it needs to appeal. It used to be that you would have like, this would be for adults, or this is particularly targeted to, or like all the Amazon shows, the Jack Reacher shows are for, adult white men over 50 and all that. You really, but what you really want is to get all the gender and age quadrants. That's really the goal.
It's like, so a 4-quadrant film would be a film with like the widest possible demographic appeal.
Exactly. And that's really what they want, especially now that so many of them, it's international. So they also don't want too much dialogue. Some of them, this is really a Netflix, the international ones especially, because they want to be success overseas. That's changing a little bit, but that was, in fact, that's a bigger problem with big features. But all these things, in a time when everyone's risk averse, there's just the needle you have to thread gets very small. But inevitably, there's still oddball, amazing shows coming out. And, the minute one of them breaks, then all of a sudden everyone wants, who would have thought something like Severance would become a big hit? I mean, you can't believe that ever made it on the air, because it's so, obscure in many ways and idiosyncratic, but of course it did. So there's always exceptions.
Well, it really is. I mean, maybe the greatest truism ever is still like the William Goldman line. Yeah. Like nobody knows anything.
Yes.
Take it to the bank. Nobody knows anything. Yes. If they act like they do, they're full of shit, and just do your thing and hope that eventually, it syncs up with the zeitgeist or the moment.
Absolutely. And I really feel that way about publishing too, about writing your novel, is not to write to trends. Not like, if you don't want to write a romantasy novel just because they're selling through the roof now, you should not be writing a romantasy novel.
By the way, if I wrote a romantasy novel, it would be the most horrifying work of fiction ever committed to the page. But, I think that coming by this kind of storytelling, like really authentically, I guess is a kind of lucky stroke, but it's also what I think makes your work so resonant. I don't think, if I tried to write romantasy, it would be terrible. Like you say, you can't write to trends. You can't force yourself into some sort of box that you're not right for. That will never work. You have to be true to yourself as an artist.
No, it won't be good writing. It won't be personal. It won't be all the things that, they're always for instance, literary agents, they're always looking for voice foremost, and it needs to be your voice. And I think if you try to, take that voice in a direction that isn't natural to you, it's never going to feel authentic. I think it's, you lean into your weirdness is what I always tell students, lean into the weirdness in you.
I'm curious, like we talked at the top of the hour about how Goodfellas was kind of an influence on Dorado Drive. And I'm wondering, with your love of film noir and crime stories, if you could just point to some of your influences. I hate to put you on the spot, but I would hope you have a few top of mind, like films, books, like what's part of your like creative DNA?
Yeah, it's certainly the big film noirs that Double Indemnity is maybe the one I've seen the most, or In a Lonely Place, which maybe not as many people have seen. Those really the 40s, early 50s, Kiss Me Deadly. Those are really there's countless others. I also like the kind of sleazier B noir, those are what like Detour or, these really kind of grim ones.
Detour is so good.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's been a minute since I've seen it, but I remember distinctly, I took a film noir class. I have a film degree. And I remember taking a film noir class, and my teacher screened that film for us. And it was that was it. I was like, that is a really great movie. And I can't believe it doesn't get talked about more.
I know. It's really, and it's, it's so nihilistic and dark and it's only like an hour and 10 minutes or something. And it's so compact and you can't believe where it goes. I always feel like it's the litmus test that if you like that, then there's whole other subterranean layers of noir that have opened up for you, and that you are now ready for. I think it's it doesn't have it's not the glamour of say Double Indemnity, which is a real slick studio prop. So if you can get through Detour with your head still on.
Yeah, Detour is like for the real sickos. It
is. It truly is. So those were all big, and then the true crime early on. So Helter Skelter was big for me. Fatal Vision was big for me. I was really into and Hollywood Babylon, which is sort of true crime adjacent. So I really like those paperbacks with the pictures in the middle. Those are all huge. And then it was really a little later that I came to James Ellroy, and then eventually to Raymond Chandler and James M. Cain and Dashiell Hammett, and the kind of big guns of hard-boiled fiction that most of those film noirs are based on their books. So it was sort of going to the origin, and the books are so much messier and stranger. So that was a big inspiration for writing a novel, is how that the tough guys are not nearly as tough in the book. They're kind of disasters. They're always screwing up, and they're always getting their knocked unconscious, and always having mysterious homoerotic experiences, and they're all kind of amazing. So that was big for me.
And I'm wondering if Elmore Leonard figured into your reading life as a youngster. Wasn't he a Detroit guy?
Yes. In fact, one of my shining moments is I got to interview him over the phone, but for LA Times. And it was just a year or two before he passed away. And I interviewed him from his home in suburban Detroit. And I was so excited because I'd read so many of his books, and he really is the guy in Detroit in terms of crime. And he was such a delight, and he was such a flirt and such a charmer. And it was great. It was everything you wanted to be. And he, for him, it was always, and what I got from his books is always character first, and that there are no villains, and that the villains are heroes in their own story. And he really has a much more and morally ambiguous universe, and that sort of gives you permission when you're starting out to break away from any idea you have about right and wrong and law and order. So that was really unleashed a lot for me.
And you said that you're adapting El Dorado Drive for A24?
Yes.
As a feature film or as
a TV series? Yeah.
As a TV series.
Yeah.
And what's the status on that? Like in development or like?
It's in development. I've written the pilot and I'm putting a big quote unquote on this, attaching talent now, as they say. You know the lingo.
Yes. I know like no one can ever talk about it. It's like, well, somebody's attached, but we can't tell you who it is.
Yeah, no, we don't have anyone attached yet. It's just gone out. But I'm excited because it's all these great parts for women in their 40s and 50s, which feels kind of special because that can often be, I think it's better in TV than film, but it is often where women in their 40s get stuck playing the district attorney or sometimes even the grandmother now. So
right. Yeah. No, this will be like really juicy parts. And like we were talking about earlier, it's like women who are desirous and unrestrained in their desire. And now I want to like cast this.
Yes,
do you have like
ideas?
Do you have a dream cast? Do you have people in your head that you were thinking of as you sat down to either adapt or when you were actually? It
always feels fatal to think that way, so I haven't. So I'm open to any suggestion. Who would you like to see?
God, I'm trying to think of. Well, yeah, I'm trying to think of actresses who might be like authentically Midwestern, and be able to really like get in there. Actresses who grew up around gin and tonics, and right. And we didn't even talk about Horse Girls, but maybe somebody who can relate to that whole scene. But why am I blanking on actresses from the Midwest?
Maybe in the Kirsten Dunst age range would be great,
Well, and then that could be kind of a full circle for her because she was in Virgin Suicides, which is also a suburban Detroit.
Same town.
I could see Kirsten maybe playing Harper.
Yes.
I could see her in that role, perhaps, because she kind of has that sort of intelligence. Like she projects that sort of quiet intelligence that I think Harper has. I don't know if she's not Pam. She didn't throw in the party. Maybe she is, but I don't think that's her. But I'd have to think on it. And let's talk, before I let you go, just briefly about Horse Girls, because I want to say I've talked more than once on this show over the years about Horse Girls. Like, it's a thing. I talked to an author named Kevin Maloney who wrote a book called Horse Girl Fever, which is about, I think, like a man who's in love with horse girls. I've also talked with authors, like female authors, who either were horse girls themselves or were somehow writing about horse girls. But what is it about girls and horses?
Yeah, they're untouchable to me. Growing up, I knew them. I would have loved to have been one. I loved Black Beauty. I read all those horse books, but at that time, other than Girl Scout camp, where you would maybe get to pet a Shetland pony, I had no access to horses. But the Hun Club, which is the club in the book, which was the real club, and you would ride your horse in Grosse Pointe, was full of them. And they were, they seemed to speak a different language. They weren't bound to, even though they were often popular and always the rich girls, they weren't bound to traditional ideas of femininity because they always were wearing their boots, and they were always kind of messy, and they always had their hair in this braid, and they always had this sort of special relationship to the horses. Like they would always be speaking to them, and I don't know, and sort of, the grooming of the horse, and seemed to have, some vaguely erotic connection to these horses. That is definitely a huge part of it, I think. That was always the big rumor growing up, is that could you still call yourself a virgin if you were diverginated riding a horse? So that's a deep girl. Because it can happen. So I'm told.
I feel like if you're riding a horse, I get it if you're living out in the country, like you're on a ranch or a farm or something, you're riding a horse, that's one thing. But if you're in some affluent suburb and you're able to ride a horse recreationally, that's some blue-blooded shit right there. Like, you got to have money. Like, it would never even cross my mind that was an option growing up. Like, oh, people ride horses for fun? Like, just... I don't know. And
no.
Yet I don't think it's necessarily super expensive.
Well, that kind of is that where you board a horse. It's different than if you were living out in the country. If you were like the 4-H club horse person where, there always were. The state fair, probably in your neck of the woods as well as mine, there would be horse girls of a different type that was, part of the ecosystem of the farming community that they grew up in, but in a very suburban place. Yeah, that was not that. It was, you had to be able to buy the horse, board the horse, and take the lessons and go to those competitions, which are always all wildly expensive. So I think that would be important if you wrote a whole horse girl book, is to separate those sets of horse girls.
So now you're a big publishing success story and a Hollywood success story. Like, are you riding horses out on Long Island somewhere? Like,
sadly, I'm in the same apartment I was when I published my first book, and I still don't have central air. So,
okay,
yeah, I think I don't have the money fever that these women have, so it hasn't gotten to me.
One day, though, who knows?
You never know.
Who knows? And I always close by asking my guest what they are working on. Like if they have anything else in the pipeline. I imagine you probably do. You seem like you're always kind of, you've got something cooking. And I know you're adapting this novel, as we've been discussing, for A24, but are there other books in the works or other Hollywood projects that you're
I have a new book in its early days, and then I'm also adapting with Scott Frank, who the showrunner who did Queen's Gambit and Department Q, and who wrote, speaking of Elmore Leonard, wrote the screenplay to Out of Sight and Get Shorty. We're collaborating on an adaptation of Dashiell Hammett's Red Harvest, which is maybe the great American crime novel. It's from the 20s. So we're doing that for Netflix. So I'm working on that pilot now. I say we're doing it for Netflix, but, green light is a long way down the road. But that's my main focus right now.
Hollywood's not looking for 1920s era.
I know.
Noir.
It's just so shocking that they bought it.
But yet they will be. They will be in 8 months from now. It's going to be all that anyone wants.
Everyone is going to want to have shows set in mining towns in the 20s and about a labor dispute, which is what it's about.
Those kinds of stories are red hot right now.
Well, there are 24 murders in it, so we have that going for us.
It's great to talk with you, and you just really have a knack for creating great crime fiction, but also knowing when an atmosphere is right. Maybe like an unconventional atmosphere, an atmosphere that wouldn't necessarily be top of mind to, for people when you talk about crime fiction. Like you can find the noir in what might not necessarily be noirish places traditionally. And it's just great to see you have all this success. And I just really appreciate the time and the conversation.
Oh, it's been so great to be back. Thanks so much for having me again.
Okay, there we have it. That was my conversation with Megan Abbott. And her new novel is called Dorado Drive, available from Putnam. It is a page-turner. Very enjoyable. You could find Megan on the internet at meganabbott.com. She's on all the social media, Instagram, I believe Facebook, Blue Sky. So track her down, follow Megan Abbott on social media. One more time, the new novel is called Dorado Drive. It is out there now from Putnam, wherever books are sold. Go get your copy right now. Don't forget to subscribe to The Otherppl Show wherever you get your podcasts. You can also subscribe on YouTube, and you can follow me on Blue Sky and Instagram. Sign up for my weekly email newsletter over at bradlisti.substack.com. And if you love this program, if you had a good experience, if you tune in week after week, if you get something from this show and you appreciate the work that I do, join the Otherppl Patreon community and show your support over at patreon.com/otherpplpod. If you want to join my book club or get an Otherppl t-shirt or a sweatshirt, you can do all of the above at the show's official website, otherppl.com. If you want to join the waitlist for How to Write a Novel, the debut course from my new company, Deep Dive, which will be launching soon, you can join the waitlist at www.deepdive.audio. Finally, if you have a couple of minutes and you want to do me a quick favor, please give this show a rating wherever you listen. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you tune in, give the show a rating, write a little review if that is an option. It helps the show in the algorithm, and it helps it find new listeners. Okay, so coming up on Thursday, I should be back with my friend and co-host Mira Gonzalez for a brand new episode of Brad and Mira for the Culture, this podcast's weekly pop culture assessment. It is a hangout show. It is irreverent. Mira appears each week on the program on a minimum dose of 100 milligrams of THC. So I don't know if that sweetens the pot for you, but that's how it goes. Mira ingests or smokes a lot of weed, and we talk about pop culture. We try to make sense of what's happening as we sift through the rubble. Stay tuned.